Space has always been considered cool, even before Neil Armstrong took that giant leap for the mankind. And as we all know, many of us all know, there has been a silent revolution that is happening in the industry. The ability of satellites to transform businesses and the quality of life on Earth is more relevant than ever before, and associated technologies have expanded at an exponential pace. A new space, as we all know, is a movement which is about the globally emerging commercial space industry that focuses on lowering entry barriers to space. And we have with us a very interesting panel who will talk about some of the very interesting new business models and essentially where is the money in this industry. We have with us one of the very big disruptors, Payam Benazda, the CEO and founder of Capella Space. I'll leave to Payam to, Payam, please join us, to give us a brief on what Capella does. Joining us also is William Woods of US Data Analytics, which essentially brings the data aspects, and Ron Lopez, President and Managing Director of Astroscale. As Kevin was mentioning, why safe space and space debris is an important point, and why there has to be space safety is an important issue in moving towards a new space economy. Kevin, I would like to start with you. Collaboration between the public and private sector is emerging as one of the major points, the hallmarks of this new space era. How do you think this can be leveraged further to realize the goals, the trillion-dollar economy, for commercial profitability, public utility, as well as sustainability of the planet that we see?
I think we're finally seeing, and my lens here is the work I've done on remote sensing for the better part of 25 years. I do remember a time when early entrepreneurs in this space would say, hey, Kevin, this capability is so exciting that the farmer will have to buy it. And I would typically say, have you ever met or talked to a farmer? No, okay? And so what we're seeing in the sophistication of the remote sensing market is the opening up of market verticals where there is an understanding of what's needed, is an exchange with the public, at least in those areas, to do a better job of providing services, to understand price points, things like that. And so those are the basis of collaboration. We're seeing it across the board in the geospatial arena, as has been discussed here over the last couple of days.
Payam, you also mentioned the funding that Capella has received. It has been one of the very successful ones within a very short period of time. The new space economy that is emerging is very much like as we see it, is like the Silicon Valley IT revolution that took place about a decade back. How do you think this is transforming the traditional Earth observation industry, and what are the new areas of business that you see in this?
Yeah, I think people use the word disruption quite often. I like to think of it more as we are building on the shoulders of the giants type of a analogy. There has, we look at partners like Airbus and we learn from them, and we, in a lot of cases, partner with the current aerospace companies and bigger companies who have been before us. They have a very unique capability. They have a lot of experience and expertise in this industry, and we're just bringing a different capability into the market that's differentiated and unique. And that allows us to have innovative business models. The cost is quite different, and the way we can interact with the customers is also allows us a lot more flexibility in a lot of ways. And I think what happens is then at the end of the day, the customer just has more options for a variety of different use cases. A lot of the customers we're working with are still working with the traditional players in the market, and in a lot of cases we're partnering with them when we're doing a joint sell, because we believe our products and our our differentiations and theirs combined together can provide something even more value to the customers. So there's a lot of disruptions, there's a lot of innovations, but I don't see it as moving the current players out of the market. I just see it as bringing more value to the end customers. The part that Capella is very much so focused over the next couple of years is going to be on the government customers, both domestically and globally. And the reason for that is those are the customers that are very familiar with the type of sensors and the type of data that we're bringing to market, and we're partnering with other solution partners out who are actively trying to unlock other commercial markets. And we're sort of giving them the chance to help us and help the market bring those use cases while we focus very much so on the government customers globally. So I'm personally very excited about the opportunities in the government market. And through the lens of our solution partners, I'm very excited about the opportunities on the commercial side.
William, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that the space industry itself, I mean, it pretty much started as a public-private partnership. And it's easy to come up with examples of where, having government as an anchor customer, as an advocate for you, not just financially, but going through the regulatory process. Even what's happening now in remote sensing, I think there's been a lot of investment on the venture community into satellite remote sensing, and it requires willingness on the side of the end users as well, but ultimately what we're seeing an opening up of opportunities within the U.S. government. I agree, the U.S. government is considered an anchor customer, especially in satellite remote sensing. Along with the willingness and interest on the side of the government, the investment by venture capitalists and others and this directly resulted in study contracts by NRO with groups like Planet and Black Sky and Capella and Hawkeye 360. It's fundamentally changing. So public-private partnership, I mean, it's always there. It's critical. It's part of the U.S. government being good stewards to their own economy and helping us maintain our competitiveness. So public-private partnerships all the way, I think they're integral to what we're doing here for sure.
Ron, for a niche area like yours, how does the PPP model or even this commercial space era looks like?
Sure, yeah. Well, to reiterate the comments of my colleagues, it sort of works the same way, right? We're just a different segment of the space economy, even though we're a few steps removed in the value chain related to this segment of the market that we're talking about here. But certainly we see a lot of demand, for example, the servicing at low Earth orbit being driven by the Department of Defense, for example. In GEO, I think initially it's going to be driven a little bit more by GEO, but it's part of that ecosystem, and responding to those government requirements helps startups like ourselves get off the ground. Another important area of public-private partnership that I think tends to get overlooked a lot is collaboration on policy. Right? Typically, we tend to think of that as the realm of the government, and the government shall create policy and the industry shall stay quiet. But to echo Payam's comments earlier, right, we'd really like to thank Kevin O'Connell and his office for proactively engaging with industry in that policy dialogue and trying to establish that permissive regulatory environment that Kevin talked about during his comments. There's been any number of panels and different mechanisms by which industry has been invited to provide comments, including the one that he mentioned earlier during his talk. And we have been very actively engaged with that. And I think that's fantastic, because that's the best way to make sure that industry's equities are represented within, once that policy is created. So even it's not typically an area where we think about collaboration with the government, but it's absolutely critical to make sure that things move forward and that we get to that $1 trillion economy.
Kevin, would you like to sum up?
I think we've seen an important shift with regard to the U.S. government and its role in the market. We've seen government agencies, again, encouraged by top-level administration policy, recognize that they can take a different approach, and that's partly enabled by the context that I talked about, and that context being importantly fueled by the finance community's understanding of the market. And what's happening is we see the government recognizing that it can place small bets in the market, multiple small bets for things that the government needs genuinely. And that does a couple of things at the same time. It allows companies it provides critical resources to allow companies to move down the path of development and the things they're trying to do, but it also allows those companies to go out into the capital markets and say, the U.S. government has given us some level of attention in a single contract, whatever it might be, which then allows the capital markets to evaluate, okay, you have a capability that is potentially commercial, or it may be a government service, ad infinitum, but we're seeing that more sophisticated approach by the U.S. government in the market because of the unique context we find ourselves in today.
Paim, you talked about not pushing the traditional players out of the market, but are we seeing a market shift here? Because the surge in demand for data as well as the data that is available today coincides also ongoing refinement in data analytics. We have onboard capabilities, better sensors, better analytics. Do you think this market shift will pit this software-only startups against the full-stack the traditional operators are transforming into full-stack companies?
I don't think so. I mean, when the Capella, full constellation of Capella with 36 satellites is launched, we'll be generating about 90 terabytes of data per day. That's a lot of data, and that's a lot of data to process, that's a lot of data to make sense, that's a lot of data to try to interpret for different markets and for different use cases. And the reality is, and we've found this over the lifetime of Capella over the last 4 years, is you can't do everything yourself. In fact, we started the company wanting to do everything, and now we're very focused on just making sure the data is of high quality, and we can bring that data to customers as well as partners and have them do a lot of things that they want to do. And so, one of the number one reasons for startups that fail is they want to do too many things too quickly, too early. And I think with bigger companies, a lot of those also exist. I mean, for a big company like Airbus, I'm picking on Airbus because I love them. For a big company like Airbus, they've got a very unique, differentiated capability. Another company like Orbital Insight has a very different, unique, differentiated capability. And for Airbus to be doing what Orbital Insight is doing, for Orbital Insight to be doing what Airbus is doing, they wouldn't be able to be perfect at both. And so I think we're going to continue seeing emergence of more and more software companies, and we're going to see, hopefully, satellite companies focusing on what they're really good at. And there's going to have to be partnership between these two ecosystems.
So, William, you are a data analytics company. That's in your DNA. So do you think this partnership model that Paim just explained becoming stronger and in times to come?
Yeah, I would say I do. I mean, there's a pretty natural divide between the data and the analytics in a practical sense, in a business sense, and how you monetize it. Ultimately, I think that the data that's generated is kind of like oil. Think of it, data's like oil, and then you've got what are all the things that you do with oil. I mean, if you haven't looked recently, it's amazing. Obviously, you drive vehicles, and not just cars, but your lawnmowers and fighter jets. But then also using this to make rubber, and you're using it to make pencils, and who knows all the other industrial products that you're using here. And so, I could be wrong, but I don't think Shell knows how to make pencils and all these other things, right? There's kind of this natural divide. And so I think that's really going to push us towards partnerships. I think, a satellite company that builds and captures this persistent remote sensing data may not know too much about agriculture, in various parts of the country. They may need somebody who's got that local expertise, who understands the software, the type of analytics, the science that you can use to extract that information, but also to do your on-the-ground calibration so you actually can know that your results are good. There's a lot of local knowledge. I mean, your same even agriculture product might work well in one part of the world, but might require a totally different approach and different calibration techniques on others in a different part of the world. So I think there's a lot of reasons why there's a natural divide between the data provider and the software and analytics provider. It's certainly possible and likely that data providers will acquire, try to bring in maybe for a few select verticals, something that they think is particularly compelling business case or application. But otherwise, I do think partnerships are kind of the name of the game for remote sensing and really growing this market.
Ron, do you see, I mean, I understand you're from a different area of expertise altogether, but if you had to comment on the partnership model, again, from your area of expertise, if you see a few years back, it was again the traditional big stack companies who were doing everything. With the smaller companies, the newer data companies, again, there is a place for somebody like Astroscale to do maybe a little bit of what Boeing was doing earlier. So where do you see you fitting in this partnership value chain?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you used Boeing as an example. So I spent 16 years at Boeing. Before that, I started my career in the U.S. Air Force. 20 plus years ago, I was a young captain at Air Force Space Command. And the dynamics that we see in the space industry are fundamentally different than I think what we see today, right? Which means two things. Number one, just to draw on some of the comments made by my colleagues here, we tend to think of innovation as being the same as disruptive, right? You can't say disruptive without saying innovation, and that's not necessarily true in this new economy because there's so much room for growth, so many different business models that can be enabled that, sure, there's always going to be disruption of existing business models, but there's a lot of room for innovation and growth that doesn't necessarily disrupt. It creates new markets, and I think we're at the beginning of seeing that, again, because those dynamics are fundamentally different than what we saw 20 plus years ago. And consequently, what you have then is the opportunity for ecosystems to develop, right? There are natural dividing lines, right, as Max said, between different segments in the industry that arise, and so there's greater opportunity for smaller companies to work together with large companies and serve a specific need or niche within that market. And so there's a lot more opportunity to grow as these different mechanisms of value exchange, these ecosystems evolve in the new space economy. And, you know, that's an opportunity for a company like us to focus on our core business, but also look at things like, you know, if we're going to have assets in space, can we use the sensors on those assets to collect SSA data, space situational awareness data, and, you know, drive some value from our assets in space. And so again, it opens up a lot of opportunities for companies to innovate both disruptively and non-disruptively by creating new markets and bring new value to the marketplace.
If I may jump in, I think it's really hard to compete on markets that don't exist. And I think a lot of people in this industry are trying to create markets. And the best way of going about that is partnerships and co-opetition as opposed to competition. And you know, someone that might be perceived as my competitor right now, I love what they're doing. I cheer for them because they are doing my work on my behalf, educating the market, talking to the customers, and bringing their capability. Once the market is created, once it is actually $1 trillion industry within the commercial side, then we can go divide and conquer and go compete. But right now, the partnership is the only way to get to that point. I think that's critical.
Kevin, would you like to add your 2 bites?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what my colleagues have said here. And, you know, in the space debris area that we spoke about, what's interesting is we see a number of companies that are focused on improving our understanding of the space environment. And they've been at it for quite a while. And a lot that they can offer. There's a great diversity of sensors that are actually coming into the market to bolster what the government has on that side of the fence. But we're also seeing the increased interest and participation of companies that are not from the space sector. Again, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence folks who can help improve the quality of analysis around space debris to make sure that when we're notifying someone of a possible conjunction in space, it's highly accurate, and I only have to call you once, not 15 times, in order to get you to actually do something.
Great that you brought in the artificial intelligence bit. We have seen significant investments in AI-enabled EO startups, like who are using that, leveraging AI and to make sense of EO data. In times to come, do you think the EO market will be increasingly driven by AI-enabled analytics and not the data itself, the entire market? Is it going to be an analytics market and not the data? Currently, it's a data market.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sorry.
No, go ahead.
But it's a tool to use the data. I mean, when you get to a point, I mean, at least on the Capella side, when you're generating 90 terabytes of data per day, there is no other way of going through and sift through the entire data set other than, using machines and computers. And, one of the big reasons that we are able to do this is because of the machines. Otherwise, good luck with going through that type of data. And big organizations like NGA, who I know are in the audience, are feeling this, and they know about this, and they're looking ahead, and they're building their capability to make sure that they can deal with this as well. So it's not just on the private sector, but also on the public and the government side. So I think it's critical.
Yeah, I think that with regards to machine learning and AI, these are techniques that inherently require large training data sets. And so they're useful, their ability to make good use out of these is a function of a lot of things, and one of those is how much training data you have. So let's take satellite remote sensing as an example. Then you could immediately even break it down by modality. If you're looking for large training data sets, you're going to find a lot more easily accessible optical data out there compared to something like SAR as an example. So you really also, I completely agree that AI and machine learning are a big part of analyzing and managing these massive data sets. And I think it's about, so basically early on, I think it really is actually data focused and data driven as sort of to attempt and answer that question. I do think actually at this time it is data focused and data driven because that's what you need in order to make robust, reliable AI and machine learning techniques. And so I think as time goes on, you will experience a slow transition. I don't think it'll be super obvious, but you will experience a transition as you essentially reach this parity point where you have enough training data to really go all out in terms of machine learning and AI techniques.
Kevin, would you want to add?
I think we're at that transition point as well. We're still relying on the data. We'll see a transition at some point where the analytics will be as important as the data.
Now let me ask very directly, where do you see the money? That is for the, where are the new sectors? Where is the business coming from currently and let's say the new times to come? Because one of the things that, again, the CEO survey, which the Geospatial World Survey threw up, which is the total geospatial industry, that they're talking about the new user segment. I'm not very sure if it is with the satellite industry as well, but you would be the best people to tell us. Where do you see the money coming from?
Whenever there's a question about money, everyone is quiet, so maybe there's no money. But I think in the short term, we see the money in government, and there are lots of governments around the world that like to build a capability internally within their government and their nation, and we want to help them build that capability. In the long term, I think the underlying information that everyone is interested to know is change. And whether you talk to some hedge funds, whether you talk to some operator that's sitting outside and trying to figure out how their ships are moving around, whether you talk about, we talked about agriculture and farm, people would like to understand change. And I think this industry hasn't gotten to a point yet that can not only detect change, classify change at the accuracies and at the persistency and at the right cadence to be unlocking that big kind of what everyone has been talking about, $1 trillion industry. Where we see that, I don't know. I think everyone is working really hard to unlock something. But the reality that I think this industry needs to really deal with is it's about multi-layer sensors, and space is just going to be part of that. And so a lot of our customers are asking about terrestrial sensors, and if something you can get cheaper and better with terrestrial in situ sensors, you should use that. And if space is going to be part of this, it's just going to be part of that as opposed to the full solution. And I think we need to fully understand and realize that from the beginning, as opposed to finding something that we believe space is the only solution and we're going to be able to unlock something.
William?
Yeah, so I would say, in terms of where's the money, I certainly agree government's a big one. But I can say on behalf of EOS Data Analytics, we are currently selling agriculture-based products, crop monitoring, classification, and other products. These are money makers for us right now. So I think in terms of the commercial market, I think there are some that are pretty interesting today. Certainly, I think agriculture is one of the biggest ones, and then we do some business and insurance as well. You know, that's kind of thinking about things focused on the sort of remote sensing application. And I'm interested, I think you'll probably have very different answers, right? Because we're focused a lot on remote sensing over here. But again, as part of the Newsphere portfolio, I mean, our founder is really pursuing a vertically integrated strategy to space and space missions. And so I think that's another type of product that you might see come online that'll generate a lot of revenue is fully integrated offerings. Someone who can come in and offer a customer, a client, you know, and different clients might want this for different reasons. They might want to simplify their contracting process. They might have high security requirements, so they're looking for a single trusted supplier. Or they might just, you know, they might not understand this very well, and they're just looking for a simple solution that this solves their problem. And I think that's where these integrated offerings come in. Somebody who can come in and say, you know, not only have I just built this satellite or have collected some data, but I've got an entire system in place where I can deploy these satellites the way you need them, when you need them with my dedicated launch offering. I've got the satellites that provide your exquisite or near exquisite data. And I've got your data analytics that are going to, you know, process that and deliver, store, manage it, and generate some useful insight for you. So I think integrated offerings as well, which kind of goes back to our partnership discussion, is going to be a big moneymaker. Also, I think it might be a natural reaction to, there is, like I said, I think there are opportunities opening up within and outside of government, opportunities opening up for multiple players. And I think that one of the natural reactions, I think people, I think one of the natural reactions is that people are going to try to clump back together again, but then that might be by providing integrated offerings that multiple companies together can provide rather than buying piecemeal solutions here and there.
Ron, where do you see the business?
Yeah, so my answer is all of the above, right? So as you know, as I mentioned in the beginning in my opening comments, my company is at a point in the value chain where we basically support and enable, you know, my colleagues here and others in the audience to be successful. So as we're that infrastructure layer, right? So as different businesses grow, as they find, as new markets expand, I think we'll be in a position to be able to support their growth and enable different business models. So I hope you guys are all right and that we're going to see this expansion because we're in a part of that layer that I think can stand to benefit across the board.
Kevin, would you like to make an intervention there?
I think the answer to the question is partly related to my comment about a better understanding of the space economy. And I mentioned one effort that we're going to undertake at Commerce, but it's only one of a number of activities that could go on. We're at a paradoxical moment for space because in many ways space is as important as it has ever been and is expected to be more important going forward. Most people on the street do not understand that many of the capabilities that they rely on throughout the day are reliant heavily on space. And so we have to do a better job of explaining to them how important it is in that dimension. And then to some of the more exotic things that I talked about, we want to do a better job of rigorously capturing the effect of the space economy for entrepreneurs, for government investors, for all sorts of people who are partly responsible for where is the money, that kind of thing. Improve that understanding. A lot of the accounting methods that we use today to capture industrial processes don't capture space as an individual category. That's the effort that I mentioned in my remarks. How will we account for those things uniquely, and where do we drive them? You know, we know that things like satellites and launches and rockets are easy to count. Some of the services that we've been talking about for the last 2 days are much harder to count in terms of their economic impact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to do a better job of all of that.
We would like, I thank you, my panelists.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.